Hey there fellow creators, Ben here from Cinderblock Studios, and this week I want to talk about my 5 favorite mixing colors for acrylic painting. Stick around. So I think when you ask an artist, specifically a painter, what their favorite color is, you might get a variety of answers. So it's like, what favorite like regular colors, my favorite paint color, favorite color of colored pencils. Like, I think there's a lot of times where it's just like, well, I have a lot of favorite colors when I'm painting, but still one favorite color in general. So my sort of favorite mixing colors, I had to kind of look through my set. I'm like, okay, what ones do I really love grabbing for a complex color mix? Not necessarily colors I'm using on every piece, but just a general set of like, okay, which ones am I going to use a lot? And be like, okay, yeah, I really like using this color because it's going to get me a good mix. So down here on my table today, I have laid out my 5 favorite mixing colors. These 2 are just duplicates of the tubes that are on the table. The first one is Alizarin Crimson Hue. Now, as you can tell, as well as if you've seen my videos before, I am partial to golden with a few minor exceptions. The Alizarin Crimson Hue I first picked up in the high flow line, and I actually enjoyed the color so much and enjoyed mixing with it so much, I ended up picking it up in the open line as well. The second color is just a high flow, not I don't have a tube of it, but it's Quinacridone Nicholaso Gold. Really, really cool color. You'll see why as I get into the demo. Next up is a color I've been using for a very, very long time, and that's Quinacridone Magenta. I will specify here it's the PR122 pigment. I specifically want to say that, not just going to give you the pigment information willy-nilly, but this particular PR122 is different than a lot of Quinacridone Magentas in other color lines. I've seen Quinacridone Magentas in brands like Liquitex or Winsor & Newton or M. Graham that say Quinacridone Magenta, but they're not PR122, so they're a very different color when you go to mix with them. So that's why I specifically want to shout that out here. Next up, we have specifically Liquitex's mix for their Prussian Blue Hue. Now, I've actually used the Golden's Prussian Blue Hue, and it's a different mix of pigments. The Prussian Blue in Liquitex, in this case, uses a violet, and I think the one in the Golden line uses a red. So it's a slightly different mix. Not really noticeable when mixing colors, but if you're using it pure out of the tube, you will notice that slight difference. Now, I have got this in the heavy body, and I actually got this in the heavy body, this particular color, not necessarily the Liquitex one, because I was using oils at the time for a class. And I was like, wow, this color is incredible. I'm going to pick it up in acrylics, and I picked it up in a heavy body tube, and eventually I picked it up in the Liquitex inks as well. And the last one that is sort of my go-to favorite colors for mixing is a Sap Green hue. Sap Green for me is the perfect shortcut green for foliage, and we'll get into that in just a little bit as well. Okay, so I've laid out my palette today with those 5 colors, as well as some cad yellow medium, excuse me, and some titanium white. I just give myself a better, and give you guys a better range of colors for when we are mixing and testing these out. Also water off to the side, but that's off camera. We'll worry about that just as basically a method of dipping and rinsing my brush. So the first of those colors, again, was the Alizarin Crimson Hue. Really nice deep red mass tone that comes out to a nice sort of pinkish reddish brown undertone. Really, really cool color. I love this specifically when making sort of more complex oranges. It gives me a nice wide range of mixing for those, but it doesn't make them a super vibrant saturated orange. It kind of kicks it back a little bit more. I also love mixing actually the Prussian Blue with the Alizarin Crimson for a deep, rich, complex violet. This depends a little bit on how much you use, and the Prussian Blue is a little bit more, has a little more tint strength, excuse me. Haven't painted in a while, my vocabulary seems to be acting up. But it really gives you a nice wide range of options, especially when you start to want to mix more complex colors. Same thing goes with even mixing with the white. You're just going to get a nice brighter pink color out of it. But it's, again, more toned down, more muted, which I really appreciate for a more complex painting in terms of color theory and mixing and everything like that. The next color up is that high flow, excuse me, Nicholaso Gold. Has a nice sort of deep reddish orange color in its mass tone, but when you glaze it out, I'll wipe that excess off, you get this really brilliant gold tone. I actually tend to mix with this less and actually glaze with it more. So it's kind of hard to put this into my set of colors for mixing. However, this plus that Alizarin Crimson really intensifies that rich brown of the mass tone, as well as mixing it with a green. In this case, we'll grab our Sap Green that we have down the bottom. Is a really nice rich undertone, earth tone, and I use this a bunch if I'm building up a thinner layer before I take grass on top of it. So I'll take that, and maybe even some of the crimson as well, and make this nice deep brown out of it. That still leans a little green and leans towards where I'm probably going to be heading with foliage. Same deal, show that with the white as well. It was a nice warm highlight color. This, if I did more figure work, I'd probably be using this primarily for facial features, light skin tones, things like that. Okay, next up, the PR122 Quinacridone Magenta. Now, if you've been following my work on this channel for a long time, you'll know that I talk about this color all the damn time. Specifically because it is just so vibrant, it is so bright, and its mixing capabilities for both a violet and for a orange or a little bit more of a red even is pretty much perfect. This is actually very close to the dye color that they use in home printer inks. When you see cyan, magenta, yellow, this is pretty close to that magenta that they use in your home printer, which is why you can get a nice wide range of colors with that. It's a little bit of cad yellow with that. That's what I use for that bright chromatic orange when I need it. I don't need it all the time, and I actually rarely do, actually. Come to think of it, even when I'm doing a sunset, I tend to lean also more of my cad red than I do on this stuff. But every time I make an orange out of it for a demo, I'm like, man, I got to use this more often. Same deal with in this case, I'm going to grab the Prussian Blue. I also have some cobalt and cerulean on my palette, not this palette, but my set of colors anyway, that I can mix a complex violet with. But I find that this and the Prussian actually make a really, really perfect one. Same deal, gives you that nice bright, vibrant and chromatic color out of it. Now that said, with the orange that we mixed before, we can then use the blue to make that nice chromatic gray, which I'm going to put over here towards the blue side since I haven't quite talked about that yet, but it gives us a lot closer of a color to a more neutral chromatic gray, which is why all these together are the palette here. And as before, mixing with that white. This is the bright fuchsia pink that you might need for certain projects. For me personally, it's not something I use a lot, but maybe like flowers or something like that. Closest thing I could end up using them for. But nice, bright color and all around good one for mixing in between a lot of other colors, really. So I've been grabbing the Prussian Blue a lot, so I actually won't show a ton of what it can do because you've already seen a lot of what it can do. Really thick, dark mass tone. The glaze is more of a almost like an indigo. Mixed with white, you get, light blue. I tend to use it grays out more. If I'm going for like a stormier sky, I'll tend to use this blue. And if I want sort of a brighter, bluer, cleaner sky, more daylight, I tend to use a cerulean or a phthalo for that. But this is just a little more toned down, and I find it good for morning skies and leaning towards dusk. It's also good mixing the Prussian and the Sap Green, just to kick that green back a little bit, and sometimes be good for deeper foliage, anything sort of shadow branches, shadow leaves, things like that. I tend to use those two together to make my green for pine trees. when I'm mixing those. I suppose the last one, and actually this is similar to the Sap Green, not the last color, but the last example for the Prussian Blue, is just mixing that with some of the yellow to make a green. And I actually tend to do this now more than grabbing the Sap Green, because I've actually been mixing just more greens from the two colors rather than just grabbing a tube green, because it makes a more complex color and a more complex piece overall. And the two together make a really nice sort of, again, like all these other colors, a little more toned down, a little less chromatic, and a little more just muted colors. That's the word I've been looking for all day. Okay, last one, Sap Green. So as I mentioned before, don't really use it a ton on its own, or even as a, I mean, it's a convenience color. I'll use it for that. I'll mix it with the yellow for that quick foliage color, and it is really perfect for that. But again, it's a lot higher chroma than what you get out of the yellow in the Prussian, or just a yellow with the gold or something like that. Interestingly enough, I'd say this color mixes probably the best with everything that I have here. Also, I'm going to get this white out here before I get too far into it. Slightly less mintier green than you might get out of a phthalo. And then mixing it with our first two. So the Nicholaso Gold. I don't know why that always takes me forever to remember the name of that. Nice long name. Gives us a nice brown. I think I might have done that over here already. And then that plus the Alizarin Crimson. I can't remember which of these has a stronger tint strength right now. Again, giving us a nice deep color, similar to what we got by mixing it with the blue, or mixing the blue with some of these other oranges and things like that. Nice deep, just chocolatey brown kind of color. And all we did was basically mix the two hues together, the Alizarin Crimson Hue and the Sap Green Hue. And what you get out of that resulting mix is just that really deep, wonderful brown. That's another reason why I just don't have brown on the palette or on my regular color set, just because I don't need it, because I can make these deep, rich colors just with the other ones I already have. So that was just a quick look at 5 of my favorite mixing colors for acrylic paints. I have a lot more colors that I actually do like to use and mix with, but those 5, I think, are the ones that I'm grabbing for those complex color mixes, the ones I need in a lot of paintings. Not necessarily every single one, but definitely a lot of them, and a lot of the ones I do, I think, lately, more so than anything else. But there's a lot of colors out there, so what are your favorite colors to mix with? They could be simple ones that are in every basic color set, or they can be the more complex ones that most people haven't heard of. Let me know your thoughts in comments below. And as always, this is Ben from Cinderblock Studios reminding you to keep on creating, and I will see you guys next time. Oh, my screen went off.